And finally, last but not least, we still unfortunately have Babel Nisei to talk about. I hated the show. It was like an even worse version of Golden Bat. Maybe if you're in early 70s Japan, you would have enjoyed this because it's an anime guy screaming and punching people, but watching it was a bore because the show never really puts any weight into any situation. It just throws you in and expects you to like it. The story is that there's this guy named Babel, and back in the day he was really cool or something, and since evil or whatever has awakened, new guy must step forward in order to fight evil. The Babel guy gives the kid the awesome title of Babel 2. Yep, this is the kind of show that we're watching. So stupid. After that, it's just Babel 2 running around with his helpers while trying to stop bad guys or whatever. And let me just stop for a moment and talk about how much of a Mary Sue this kid is. Eventually, he fights the bad guy, and I would say beats him fairly easily, essentially after fighting for just a little bit. Every challenge he faces through the first 5 episodes don't even feel like challenges. They are just to waste your time. And I know the characters have psychic powers that allow him to do crazy stuff, but don't you think the main character physically should suck a little more before getting this strong? Or is it just me? With all these old shows, I try to watch at least 10 episodes, if I can find them that is, and even though I found 10, I can only really stomach just 5 and I dropped it. Now, I guess I should preface to say that before we start off, I originally said I think that I'll watch 10 episodes of each show, and for the most part I did. When I started off, I would write as soon as I was done with the show, and, some personal life stuff happened and I just couldn't get to my ambitious video making project, so I accidentally forgot a lot of the shows that I marathon. So I basically had to rewatch a lot of these shows and that I had planned to write about. And after everything was said and done, I said to myself, look, do I really need to watch 10 episodes? If the show is a piece of shit in just 3 or 5 episodes, surely that should be enough. And really, one thing that I also hope to do with this video series is detect certain narrative through lines within the anime industry, so I could paint a bit of a picture about, how it evolved, like I said earlier. So with all that being said, I don't have time to watch 10 episodes of each show that ever came out, because it's too fucking time consuming. So only on the, really worthwhile shows, or shows that are short enough will I want. Like for the most part, like 13 to 20 episode series, I try to stomach as much of those as I can, and I made an effort to finish at least over 10. But yeah, just know I'm not watching every show to completion. I know some people get on reviewers for that, but to start off, I have a lot to talk about. Now, one show that I've been waiting to talk about is a show called Ace Wo Nare. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Now, I have a lot to talk about with this show. I understand this is about sports and the effect competition can have on someone. The insecurities that come in play in an athlete's mind can be really difficult to go through, and I think all athletes have to deal with constant doubt because in all sports there are problems that can't always be met with the same solution. And also, even if you are a winning prodigy, there are still a lot of losses that you, of course, must suffer in order to become good. And of course, it's very obvious, there's a strong trial and error aspect that goes into all sports, because you have to know what works and know what doesn't. And going through that can be really tough and strenuous, especially if you are like the main character and have low self-esteem, and you use sports to build your confidence. I felt that the main character of the show was kind of bitchy. However, I do understand what kind of story this is. Now, the only strong athletic thing I've done is some full contact martial arts. Again, not very long, mind you. And since then, I have taken in a lot of information from various news and podcast sources concerning the mental and physical well-being of athletes. And from all that I can understand, having a character in a sports show, and basically from all that, I guess I could understand having a character in a sports show that initially quits all the time. Some people hate quote-unquote wimpy characters that may quit from time to time, but whatever. I mean, as long as it leads to character development and they get better. To be quite honest, I actually tend to like characters that fail most of the time, or quit here and there. Just to give you some context, some of my favorite characters are Raiden from MGS2 and Shinji from Evangelion, both of which are said to quit way too often and be wimpy. There are tons of people who absolutely hate those characters, and personally I always felt like there are elements of the story that they all just flat out overlook. Now, along with myself, many others are able to look into the reason as to why those characters are in the situation they're in, and of course, we're able to relate with them. When talking about MGS2, the whole meta-narrative confused a lot of people. Not everybody understood why they're playing as this kind of wimpy Shujoshi guy. The game wasn't just being lazy or something, or throwing a new character in there to shake things up. In Metal Gear Solid 2, the fans expected an experience just as grand and as amazing as the first. But of course, if you know the reason as to why they made those characters like that, then it is reasonable to say that these experiences couldn't be recreated in a more transparent, different way. But that's okay, who needs the same thing again and again? As you know, with endless amounts of sequels, what is the point of it all? They should only be made if there's something more to explore or more vision of that someone else could add to it. The creators of MGS2 wanted to subvert the expectations in hopes of the fans by having you play as a character who represents the player. Raiden is a character who has been trained using VR simulation, and the simulation he was trained in was the events of the last game, where he studies the protagonist of that game, of course, Solid Snake. The whole time in the game, Raiden was trying to emulate Snake because he recognized him as a great hero and wanted to be just as good as him, and kind of idolized him. The fans were expecting another cool game with Snake, but instead what they got was an allegory for themselves. Solid Snake was a damn cool action character. The fans were craving to play as him. With being put with a character like Raiden, who is kind of in the same shoes as the player, who wants to be as cool as Snake and thinks he should be the one in the situation because of his experience, you get to see a different side of things. And through this, we get to learn what the game is trying to tell you about the control of media and its effects on society and all that deep mumbo-jumbo. With a character who was manipulated like the fans were, Raiden was being made into something he was not. Like my point earlier about sequels, and most of the time they're made without a point. That's why he was made, to subvert the fans and show them how you can't recreate the same experience. All the fans, they wanted the same experience as the first game, but better, but why not something different and new? And it was also to give them a character who is a lot in common with the player, but feels the need to push forward and grow from his experiences with what he now knows. And along with that, Raiden becomes very likable in his life once you get to know him. But of course, everyone just wanted to play as Snake, so they didn't give a shit. You don't need the same experience again, and you don't need to be like everyone else. You could be something new and different. With Shinji, people kept bringing up how he refused to get in the robot over and over again. But the people criticizing the show never put into consideration that he was thrust into that situation unknowingly. Or if they did acknowledge that, they would end up saying that because Shinji is supposed to represent someone who might be 14, then that's exactly what makes him obnoxious, and they don't want to watch a show about a 14-year-old who is wimpy. But teenagers are usually stupid for not recognizing their responsibilities, and they don't have everything figured out about themselves, and they may not be as tough or daring as some characters in another series. And of course, the fans don't find Shinji as tough or daring as the characters in the other series. To me, this is really lame thinking though, because you have to think about what the character is and why they are there, and the sheer amount of crazy pressure that this crazy plot puts on his psyche. Besides, Shinji still saved his friends from time to time, and did show up when he needed to. Enough people understand now why Eva is great, so I don't think I should go on another tangent on explaining the nature of Eva's story, or why it confused everyone. There's plenty of videos that do that. But anyways, that was a long tangent. But anyways, back to this 70's show. The problem with this character isn't that she gives up too much, or she quits way too often, or at the wrong times. It's just that in that time of sulking or moping around, I don't necessarily feel like her emotions were always expressed in a meaningful way that seems reasonable as to why she feels like she's at a loss. She communicates her thoughts frequently, but I just don't find her thoughts to have really shown appropriate detail why she feels the way she feels. Pretty much almost all the time the show goes on, she quits. I think I can relate to almost all of them. It's just that it all comes to a point where you get tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. I know it may sound like I hate this character and don't find her likable at all, but I do find her likable to a degree, and at times maybe even root for her to succeed. Anyways, I think when I started the show I couldn't find the very first episode, but when I started off on the second, we see a young high school girl hanging out with her upbeat, jovial friend. They're both on the tennis team, and it's clear that no one likes the main girl because she sucks and is very behind when it comes to the skills of the team. The coach sees some potential, but it's taking some time to come. The main character has very low self-esteem and wants to just run away from all her problems. Her friend, however, always picks her back up and reminds her that she's capable and has the tools to get the job done and successfully be a part of things. And you can tell in the very beginning how the girl was looking for some kind of purpose, I guess, and direction in life, and that tennis was her drive that gave her a sense of purpose and a means of understanding herself, and a means of understanding herself better and, growing up. I mean, the mentor character was kind of cool and had some interesting ways of dealing with the students. The best friend character was pretty likable and somewhat funny. However, one thing I did not care for was the rival character. She's just a stupid, mean, jealous, bitchy character, and that's her whole character pretty much. She tries to sell out the team practice information to a rival team in one episode. Pretty, textbook stereotypical as far as bully rival characters go. One part I liked was when the main character had to quit because absolutely no one in the team liked her, and this led to her feeling useless, and in the end her passion calls her back, and I thought of similar experiences with my own art. I sucked and gave up and realized that I love drawing way too damn much. For any passion, I think it is normal to have a phase where you may severely question your direction, as you should. I should say I really enjoyed the fact that the main character barely ever won, because when she did, it really meant something. It showed just how grueling trying to get into a tough sport is, and just provided overall more realism to everything. Even if you start to understand things in a sport to a certain degree, that still doesn't take away from punishment that you still inevitably have to take, and how difficult doing that is. Overall, show's not bad. I am mildly interested to see what happens as the show goes on, but the main themes of sports being hard and the main character having a hard time is just sort of drawn out and tiresome after a while, despite getting the overall point of it and liking it to a degree. I'm thinking a 5, maybe like 6 out of 10 overall. I think I definitely will watch more of it in the future, but the pacing and just overall everything about the show just seemed kind of stilted, like it was just going to kind of go on and on and on and on. I feel like I pretty much get the deal of the show anyways. Like I said, I mean, I admire weaker characters, but in this instance, the character development was just way too drawn out and not super fulfilling.